Greetings all, welcome to Everything Borrowed, where we sit down to share stories and have conversations with entrepreneurs to artists and everyone in between. Today's episode is powered by Blake's Hard Cider, 100% fresh pressed, all natural and gluten-free, straight from our family's 75-year-old farm in Southeast Michigan. Find us in your local grocer or have Blake's direct ship to your home by visiting blakestore.com. Use promo code EverythingBorrowed to receive 10% off your first order. Must be 21 years of age. Please enjoy mindfully. My guest today is Mark Hackel, hometown hero and political rarity. Mark is the Macomb County executive who has managed to gather support of Republican and Democratic voters alike by being honest, open, and using a little thing my grandpa calls common sense. Mark is a great dude and a great guest, and I hope he runs for governor. Cheers. Thanks for coming out.
Oh, you bet. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Anytime.
Wanted to have you on a little bit today to just talk about things, on the home front.
Sure.
And, obviously you're
Love to.
county executive of Macomb County. And for me, the reason why I wanted to have you on was most of us are pretty sick with politicians. You are one that is refreshing for me because I feel like you shoot people straight. You seem to not be playing party lines, and I think that comes from your experience in law enforcement. And really wanted to sit down with you and hear your take on what's going on, not only in Macomb County, but at the state stage and national stage. So I know we didn't kind of preface what we'd get into a little bit, but
I normally don't ask because I'm ready to roll. So I don't want to know. I don't want to know ahead of time. It's like whatever we're going to ask, let's talk.
There you
about
go.
it.
There we go. Then
we're getting bash politicians. I'm all in.
All right, perfect.
So,
all right, we're gonna have some fun.
Trust me.
I guess we'll just start on the home front. You've been very, I thought, upfront about kind of how we're handling COVID. You seem to be very transparent about what's working, what's not working, and that's been really refreshing for me. But what do you see? Where are we at on the home front as it relates to the COVID pandemic? And, is there light at the end of the tunnel? Are we going to be back to, feeling like normal, middle of the year? Or what's the timeline look from your standpoint?
Yeah, if you look back, March 13th was the first case we got here in Macomb County. March 11th was the first one that actually hit the state. And actually simultaneously, Wayne County and Oakland County both got their first cases. But we knew it was coming this way. And so what do? We ramp up. We kind of get an idea of what's going to be happening from our law enforcement background. It's emergency management, and the department that you need most standing by your side during this is the health department, because they understand it's not their first rodeo. They've been down this path before. They understand about vaccinations and how to keep people safe and all that and get messaging out. So we were prepared for that, and we were ready for that and trying to figure out how do we stockpile PPE, because most people at that time didn't really take it serious. People thought it was going to be something that was just going to be here today, gone tomorrow. Mm-hmm. And there was still kind of a lot of reluctance. But as time went on, people started to realize, wait a minute, there's something a little bit more serious to this. And I think what you had politicians now starting to take this on because they were getting attention from it. And that's what politicians tend to do. When there's an issue out there, they want to glom onto it, and they try to figure out how do they get themselves some kind of, I guess, if you will, status or stature out of this and for political gain. And it was happening on both sides of the aisle. And
right.
So instead of looking at it from an emergency management perspective, from a health department perspective, you had too many people out there trying to politicize the issue. So we tried to stay focused on, okay, we need masks, we need gowns, we need sanitizer, we need all these things. In fact, we even reached out to you guys to try to figure out, you were trying to make some sanitizer stuff.
Yep.
So, but we were going across the entire county to try to figure that out, at the same time trying to figure out how do we get people to realize, okay, we got to start figuring out this is serious and getting that messaging out there. And you know what? We got to that point where there was enough, if you will, stockpile for the PPEs and everything. And then the big question, when are we going to start moving forward with this vaccination issue? And I think that's where we're at right now.
Sure.
The biggest concern right now is you got Republicans beating up Democrats, Democrats beating up Republicans, blaming each other. In the meantime, the public doesn't know what to believe anymore.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of social media. And so you tend to find your position on something, and then you'll read and, I guess if you will, embrace whatever it is that kind of goes along with your own mindset or your own thinking.
That's the problem, too, is I think, people have kind of jumped onto one side or the other, and you have these echo chambers on social media that are just feeding you what you want to hear.
Right.
Talking about the other side and the way in which you want to hear that.
Yep.
And then, you're not being shot straight. We were talking before about, old school radio where you just heard it as it was, and there was one person, you were listening to Walter Cronkite or whoever it was, and that was where you're getting your news from. And now,
and a lot of times that was it was a very fair, independent news. Now you don't know who owns these news stations and these new channels, and who's paying the bills.
Right.
And so they're being told to kind of migrate a message towards that thinking or that thought process. So we just stayed focused on, okay, what are the issues? And early on, it became one of those, well, we're going to have to do the shutdown of the economy. And then there's the stay-at-home orders. And, people kind of understood that at the time. When it come around April, people were a little bit concerned. And we thought, okay, we can kind of buy into this and we'll be part of the solution. But as time went on, it was like these orders became, mortars. And then there was this fight for the, if you will, the governor in particular, dealing with the legislature and saying, I'm going to lock you out of these decisions. We're not using the emergency management law, 1976 law that was out there, went back to this 1945 Act. And as a person who's been part of the executive branch, I realize you can't do that.
Right.
You got to allow the legislature an opportunity to be part of it. And if you do have some health orders, that needs to be through Michigan Department of Health and Human Services
Sure.
to go ahead and put forth those orders. You can't just as one person dictate what's going on in people's lives. And there was a pushback from that, and I got a lot of negative response, in particular from the governor, because my position on that was that's not the proper way
I
of
loved
doing
your
it.
position on it. And I thought
it was the right position.
when did it become that, whether it's the president, whether it's the governor,
Or county executive.
that they have, the gavel,
Yep.
to be able to, just write something into law? It feels that there's a legislative process, and in times of emergency, I understand there's emergency powers, but this seems like something that the legislator should have been.
And by example, we did that early on. Right away, we realized, okay, we need to invoke, if you will, the state of emergency in the county, like everyone else can. The governor, cities can, as well as obviously other counties. We did. And with that, you have 7 days. And then if you can't get this thing under control with your emergency management and everything, you then appeal to the legislative branch to say, hey, we need to extend this. And the reason for the extension is very simple. The only reason you're doing that is if there's a need to bypass certain constitutional provisions, like in other words, me having to go through a board to get requests fulfilled, there's a streamlined process to do that. And so they agreed after our first request to give us another month.
Mm-hmm.
Then we realized because of the way this was hit, and we didn't have the proper PPE in place, and we need to figure out what we're doing with our own employees internally and reassigning people, getting them out of the building. They then realized, okay, that we came to them again, asked them one more time. It says, we still don't have this place. They agreed with it. But it was them giving up their role. So they agreed to say, okay, we'll bypass provisions that the legislature is normally accustomed to and allow the executive to go ahead and move in that direction, but we still want to know what's going on. And by the time we got things in place, we said, you know what? We've got everything locked down now. We have a feeling where we're headed. Now we want to work with you as we continue to move forward to deal with this pandemic. And we didn't ask for that third time to say, hey, if you will, can you make an extension? And at that time, that's the same thing that happened at the state level. Mm-hmm. The third time, they said no. And so all of a sudden, there was this unique or obscure 1945 Act, which obviously the Supreme Court ruled on and said that's not appropriate, it's unconstitutional. They ruled on a Friday, and that very Monday, the governor went ahead and moved forward with what they call the Health and Human Services Order. So that's what we should have done, or she should have done from day one, as opposed to this big controversy in locking out the legislature under the 1945 Act.
Yeah, and what's your opinion on government's role in dictating essential businesses and not? Because I know that's been a hot topic in the entrepreneurial community. I have a lot of friends in the restaurant industry. They're on life support, and a lot of them worse. Where they're just not opening back up. It's a sensitive subject, and I've always been, my position's always been. It seems like the businesses with the smallest lobbies, with not the right representation, at Washington or at the state, are the ones that are being affected the most. That might be. That might just be my opinion. That could be wrong, but to me, it feels that it's more of the illusion of action than really something that I think is supported if you're really following the science. But I'm just curious what your thought is philosophically on how we do that, because there's not a right answer, and I'm not not criticizing the governor, but I'm just curious. What's a philosophy in which you can lead by?
Yeah, and here's a quick example. They came out with this color-coded chart, and they called it My Safe Start chart. And I go back to my law enforcement days, 911, when that incident happened, and obviously took it changed the course of the country when it comes to security. People were worried about it. The federal government finally, months later, decided to come out with this color coding system that they had.
I remember it.
Yeah, it was an emergency warning system, and it was green, it was yellow, it was orange, and all the way up to. And it provided really no information for the public to truly understand. 8 years later, they finally abandoned it. But when that came out, I was a sheriff at the time, and immediately it went out. The media was calling me, asking me what my take on that was. And I used kind of a unique way of saying it. I said, "You mean Operation Crayola?" And I said it because I was really upset about it, because it provided no real direction for the public to understand what that meant. If we're in code red, we're in code orange, code green. Everything was just a heightened sense of, if you will, a sense of alertness to, there might be something out there, but they're not telling people directly what it is.
Not
they
the
need
nuance.
to know. Right. And so this came out, and it was a color-coded system with some percentage things. And early on, when we were in phase 3, which is not a good, phase to be in, bars and restaurants were open, and they were in phase 5. And so I'd ask the question, I said, how can they be open if we're in phase 3? Got no answer. So again, what was is the messaging didn't
Didn't
match
line up with the plan.
right. And
Right.
so when I kept asking a question, because businesses were asking, when can we open? Are we being shut down? And I had no answers, and I had to go to the frequently asked questions sections of the state's website, and that's just inappropriate for any public official who is responsible to the, I guess, if you will, the masses, to try to figure out how to explain some of these executive orders to try to understand that. And today, I defy anybody to tell me what color are we in and what number are we in. Nobody knows. They've abandoned it already.
And when's the end state? And what are the metrics that we can follow to know when we've reached that, so we can celebrate and unify around that and work together around that. You know, when you don't have a clear goal for the mission,
and so it becomes.
It seems like it just creates. It creates chaos in a way.
And people are wondering that. So is it really based on data, science, statistics, or is it just something arbitrary that one person is deciding for us? And that became the problem. And so I think that's what most people were starting to feel. Mm-hmm. So who is it that you have to please? Who do you have to appeal to get them to understand what's going on? And that's what businesses were having a hard time with. Mm-hmm. And I truly believe from day one, and we said it to our health department, we're not here to be punitive. We're not here to figure out how do we find somebody or some organization or company or business here in Macomb County. That is not what we're doing. We're trying to figure out how do we work with them and engage with them, because there's so many different, if you will, whether it's executive orders or now health orders out there with so many nuances to them that I got to believe everybody walking around right now today, whether you're an individual or a business, you're violating it to some extent.
Of course.
And so with that being said, we're not here to be punitive. You know, there's some outliers out there that probably do something a little too far, or
right.
They're going to cause a problem. Most businesses, I got to say 99.9% of them want to be part of the solution. They want to protect their employees. They want to protect their patrons. They don't want this to be a problem within their business or their company. So they just want direction and looking for some support. And that's what we have done. But unfortunately, I think you're seeing coming from the state a little bit more punitive nature and that heavy-handedness. So we refuse to do that early on. And so we continue to if you will, appeal to everybody saying, you know what? We know businesses here in Macomb County want to be part of the solution, and we're here to help them through that process, and we continue to have that philosophy.
Well, I know I can speak for many Macomb businesses that are thankful for the way in which you guys have conducted yourselves and supported the community, because there is no blueprint to this. Everyone's trying to do their best, and when you don't have clear communication from the top down, and you can go beyond the state, you can go to the national level. There's fingers to point and people to blame all over, but that's not really the game we're in. We're really trying to find a way to get back to normal, so businesses can plan around that. I know we're going through a huge 2021 planning exercise, this week and next, and it's just interesting. We're running two different models, for our planning our business, and we're lucky enough to be able to have acreage and space, so we have a pretty good plan B, assuming things don't open back up. But most businesses don't, and from my take on talking with other businesses, there's a lot of businesses who need things to come back online sooner rather than later. And the other thing I didn't understand was, when you talk about these lockdowns, where's the other metrics, the nuance of what a lockdown actually does to kids in school, to people with mental health issues, substance abuse issues? I mean, there is all these other metrics and all these other nuances beyond just the COVID,
and nobody's talking about that.
And no one's talking about
that.
And
it is a real issue.
And it's a huge issue.
It is.
And I know from personal experience, a lot of people are struggling in different ways beyond just, getting COVID, surviving COVID, that sort of thing. And obviously that's a huge part. But in public policy, there's more than just health policy, right?
Yes. and we're dealing with that. I mean, obviously we have I'm in charge of the health department and obviously the county morgue. And with that being said, that hasn't gone away. It's actually increased when we start to see, this issue dealing with substance abuse related deaths, issues dealing with suicide. I mean, there are so many different concerns that are happening in the mental health issue, community mental health here in Macomb County. They're telling us, the cases are continuing. I mean, even beyond what they'd been before. So these are real issues. And with that being said, you can't dismiss that. You got to realize, okay, how do we coexist with this particular virus? And it's been long enough there's got to be a way that we can do it. It's almost been a year now, in particular, since Macomb County has become aware of it. You got to figure out how do we get through that, as opposed to just ignoring that and still focusing on saying, hey, we got to shut these businesses down. You got to allow them an opportunity to open up and try to figure out how we can coexist.
Yeah, and I don't want to sound like I'm just promoting for business, because I understand all the other elements, but there are so many other human elements that affect people that I think there should at least be a conversation around it. Yeah. Mental health, substance abuse, all these things.
The question was
even children learning, and if you think about people learning from home, kids learning from home, who's most negatively affected by that? Lower income families,
Yep.
minority families that in low income districts. I mean, it's not affecting everyone the same, and there's huge effects. I mean, kids can't learn. I know in Armada, I think 40% of our I just joined the school board because I wanted to, get back into the community. You. Yeah, we'll see. But, I don't know if I can handle politics. But, I'm not as smooth as you. But the school board is something I was passionate about. And, I feel very blessed to have Armada Schools, which is just an amazing school system. But they said they had to set up, learning centers at Armada High School and middle school and elementary school because 35% of our kids don't have access to internet.
Right.
Which is crazy to me. I didn't.
Right.
I mean, we're not like in the UP.
Right. You would think that this would be not a non-issue here in Macomb County.
Yeah. Yeah.
St. Clair, Lapeer, and beyond.
Yeah.
You still would think even in the Thumb area this shouldn't be a concern, but it is. No question about it. And
Yeah.
we're seeing it. And unfortunately, here in Macomb County, I got to tell you, we've had a great working relationship. Mike DeVault and he's in charge of the ISD and all the school superintendents in Macomb County. We are engaged on a weekly basis with calls with our health department, emergency management, planning department to try to figure out how do we assist them to making sure. And one of the first things we did, because we got some funds from the federal government, $152.5 million came to Macomb County to figure out how do we deal with our businesses. In fact, $70 million of that was set aside just to figure out how do we deal with the businesses. $70 million of the $152.5. But then the schools, we decided, we got to figure out how do we help them by supporting the funding available. And what we did is we made a commitment that the funding we had was not just for the PPE, but every school district that needed a computer for the kids, we had that money available for them so they can go ahead and purchase those computers because we knew this was going to be
a huge challenge.
It was going to be a big challenge, specifically in the south end of the county. And with that being said, the schools have been right on board. But one of the bigger challenges I had is, early on, and this is kind of the thing that really bothered me is when we were talking about leaving the legislature out of the picture here. They weren't being involved in deciding what businesses could be open, couldn't be open, whether you could eat popcorn at a movie theater and all these things. But when it came to the issue of school districts, it was interesting how the governor relented and said, I'm going to let the localist of legislative bodies and their administrations make a decision what to do with our kids in our schools as far as opening or closing. I'm thinking if you're going to allow the lowest level, I guess if you will, the localist of levels, of legislative bodies to go ahead and make a decision about our children, well, you certainly should be allowing our state legislators to be engaged in issues about eating popcorn in a movie theater.
Right.
And so with that being said, what happened is they set up this program where, they can make their own decisions. But then any time there was a kid or a teacher who called into the school and says, hey, I can't come in, I was in close contact, it was associated with that school, as that school now has a case. And if there were two, it was considered to be an outbreak at that school. And it would publicize it as if there's something bad going on at that school, when in reality, the schools had a mechanism in place so that they weren't coming in and affecting others.
Right.
But anybody who's listening to this, who's at home and they hear that, this, Armada School had an outbreak, they had, in that area 3 or 4 kids. It's not that 3 or 4 kids were in that school.
3 or 4 people reported that kept away.
Because the state reporting requires
so
them
that
to
actually be a
report
good thing.
And they probably got it from someplace else outside of the school.
Well, doesn't it seem just like everything has become so dramatized? Everything.
And I use the word politicized. And again, I hate to say it, but it's the fault of a lot of politicians that are out there who are, they tend to sometimes use issues like this and they profit politically from it. And again, that whole banter across the aisle, it's the Republicans' fault, it's the Democrats' fault, whatever. People don't want to hear that no more. They don't want to hear about fault and who's to blame and, people taking credit for the wonderful things that are happening. Well, if you're going to be taking credit for the lives that are saved because of the things you've done to try to, make sure that people don't catch it, then are you still going to take credit then, I guess, if you will, for the deaths that are occurring? Or are you going to take credit for people that are still getting sick or impacted by this? There's nobody deserves credit over this.
Right.
And nobody deserves blame over it, but we need to figure out how do we work together. And
that's well said.
And it's unfortunate because, I've been in this, I watch it, and I'm thinking to myself, it has nothing to do with any one individual. It has to do with the community coming together, and if it's truly about this, we're all in this together, we need to be part of the decision-making process too, so that we know that it's not just one person dictating what's happening as far as the rules, and that's what we elect legislators to do. No different than school board members. They're elected to help us make these decisions. Good, bad, or indifferent, they still need to be part of the solution.
Is it terrible being a politician right now?
I truly enjoyed being the sheriff, to be honest with you. I mean, I adored that job. 30 years in police work, and 10 of it was as the sheriff. And, I was very young when I got elected to be the sheriff, and I absolutely adored that job more than anything. When I first got into this as county executive, I come to realize, it's not about dealing directly with people and or, if you will, the law enforcement officers that you kind of surround yourself with. It was much more engaging with politics and politicians who have an expectation that you're gonna kind of meander to one side or the other. And
Right.
if you have a D next to your name, you better be, I guess, supporting that slate. And I think, as people can say, not to digress into it, but once I got in, I found there were problems even within the organization itself, dealing with a
Right.
public works official that we
Right.
had, and I supported Candace Miller.
Right.
I took a lot of flack for that from the Democratic Party, but it mattered not to me. The reality was she was the right candidate, still is the right candidate, and everybody, I think, would have to agree.
Well,
And then the same thing when it comes to the situation deal with the prosecutor. What was going on in the office was challenging, and if I'm not going to step forward and tell people about this, well, then who will?
Right.
And that's what the public asked me to do. Not
Right.
because he's a Democrat and you're supposed to support him
Right.
through thick and thin and not talk about these things, but
Well-
I'll support either side as long as it's the right person. It has nothing to do with the politics. It's about the people.
yeah, and that's one of the things I've always admired about you, and I think it's because you didn't come up a politician. You came up in law enforcement. You can't politicize law enforcement. And
What's the issue? I don't pull somebody over and ask them. Hey, I ask them for their driver's license registration. I don't ask them for their voter's identification
Yeah,
card.
exactly.
And that's the funniest thing. It has nothing to do. You go to a domestic dispute. You got somebody pulled over for drunk driving or whatever it might be. Whatever. They're average people. People make mistakes. You deal with them. Whatever. It didn't matter to me whether they're Democrat or
Yeah.
Republican. Why should it now?
Yeah,
It's not an issue.
And I think it's very refreshing, but it just seems like, are you just putting yourself, do you feel that you're just in the crosshairs at all time? Because I feel like the population as well as the politicians have become, expecting you to only hold party lines and not be able to come into the middle with common sense, thoughts and solutions. And do you feel that you're under a microscope?
No.
As it relates to
No.
what decisions you make, and if it is the right democratic decision, or
I feel I'm lucky because I'm not into this to try to figure out how do I get reelected or elevate myself to the next level. I really wasn't planning on running for sheriff. I did. It was a very challenging time in my life when I decided to do it. I got lucky. People said, we support you. I got in. And it wasn't the party that supported me. They weren't supporting me. It was the people that did. So I realized, focus on the people, not the party, and that'll get you through. And why they say I'm lucky is because I've been able to break through that barrier. It doesn't matter to me. I'm not worried about a primary, and that's what most politicians are worried about right now. They're worried about being primaried if they're not conservative enough or if they're not liberal enough. And so they're not going to be the candidate that makes it through to go ahead and go to the big dance, and that's the general election. For me, I don't worry about that. In fact, I hear all the time, the Democrats are going to run somebody against you, in your own primary. And if they do and they win, so be it. I'll move on. I'm not here to try to figure out how do I worry about, somebody's coming after me or somebody may might win. And
what,
again,
what do you think the biggest problem with politics is right now at a national level?
primaries.
Yeah.
Primaries, and the fact that we even have parties. And you think about it, if we got rid of the party aspect of this, for prosecutor, for sheriff, for clerk, for treasurer, for county executive, for public works, you'd get two of the best candidates that would come forward, and they would try to sell or appeal themselves to the public, and whatever one got the most votes in the end would win. And it wouldn't be because, well, we want a Republican, we want a Democrat. I hear it all the time, and I mean, in a way, it's refreshing. I enjoy hearing it when people come up and they say, yeah, you're the only Democrat I vote for. And those are very strong conservative areas. And when I hear that, I kind of, in a way, I think, okay, well, that's good to hear. I'm glad because they know that's not how I operate. But I wish more people would be able to say that about more public officials rather than just myself. And I was fortunate, even as a sheriff, there were two elections as sheriff. I didn't lose one precinct in the entire county,
Is that
even
right?
in strong conservative areas. And even now as county executive, I've been able to make that a reality as well. And so I say that not because, okay, I'm so wonderful, people like me. It's because I realize they do that because I'm not here to try to figure out how do I play partisan politics.
Yeah.
I'm here to try to figure out how do we deal with a particular issue and how do we resolve that and move forward. And I think that's that law enforcement background.
Yeah.
I'm here to figure out what are the facts, what are the issues, and how do we solve this particular problem. And who do I need to engage to help me with that process? Not, figuring out how do we lift each other up on a political platform.
Sure.
So.
When you look at yourself as county executive, in some ways you could say you're kind of like the CEO of the county. You're trying to make the big moves, to pull the big levers that help the most people and the constituents in which you serve. What are those big milestones, those goals I referred to earlier, that we're going through a big planning process for 2021, trying to set our goals, align our vision and create our metrics for success. When you look at moving forward in 2021 for Macomb County and even forward, what are the things that you aspire to for the county And how do you go about mapping out a plan to get there?
Well, the first thing is I've already done that, and one is I've gone beyond my own expectations in life as a kid that grew up in South Warren. I don't think of myself any different than any other person around. I mean, I still wear the blue jeans, walk around, and just kind of act like any normal person because I am.
Yep.
So I never get ahead of myself because I realize when I'm out of this, I'm going to be going back to being Mark. So continue to be Mark now in the meantime.
Yeah, right.
So you're not disappointed when you lose an election of being Mark.
Yeah.
And so with that being said, that's kind of the personal side of it. Professional side is getting the right people around you, not people that are political. I've got a great team. I got a great staff of people that truly understand what it is they do, and they help educate me every day. I was in law enforcement. I understood about police work, and I still called myself a student of the criminal justice system, even after 30 years and having been the sheriff. Well, right now, I didn't know a lot about roads. I didn't know about economic development. I didn't know about issues dealing with the health and human services and health department. So when I got in to become the county executive, I wanted to learn as much as I can, but I wanted to learn from people that were subject matter experts, not politicians that helped me during an election cycle, but people that truly knew their trade. And with that being said, you can identify early on who those people are that'll make things happen. They're the ones that are go-getters, and they're the ones that truly are going to help educate you. So in that process, I've come to realize there's some important issues here in Macomb County we need to elevate. One of those that was near and dear to me was the criminal justice system and the communication system we have for our technology and dealing with 911 calls. No one has what we have as far as the infrastructure in a place that's called Comtech to deal with the communications and technology. Here in Macomb County, basically, we probably have the most connected corridors than any other county in the entire state, meaning we have
Does that mean the police departments can connect with each other?
No, it just means even people driving in their car, whatever technology goes in your car to help make your car safer as you're traveling down those roads, Macomb County already has the infrastructure in place. But that was almost by accident. Why? Because we have cameras up and around every community, every major intersection in Macomb County. No other county has this, where we can actually see the traffic and we can monitor the traffic signals going on. But we enhanced that to the point where we started realizing, hang on, for mobility, where we're headed with this, if you will, self-driving vehicles, we are now being looked upon by all the various, if you will, big three. So we're actually, GM is testing vehicles on Mound Road.
Is that right?
Fully autonomous vehicles on Mound Road right now. So we have something in place that we've never had. So we're trying to, if you will, grow that. So from our manufacturing base, there's so much happening in the defense industry. We didn't realize we were the defense capital of the Midwest. So I tend to look, and I had a counterpart in Oakland County, Brooks Patterson. Every time he talked about something, he'd make it sound like they were the best in the entire world. So we did that. We started saying Macomb County gets more defense contracts than any other county in the entire state. I mean, by far. In fact, even in this entire area, in the northern area of America here. So we started realizing we need to promote that.
Right.
We're the defense capital of the Midwest, but we're going to become the defense capital of the world. So we're growing that along with Selfridge Air Base. They used to talk about Selfridge every time there was these BRAC realignment and closures, if they will. These base realignment closures. So those BRAC studies, they were concerned. Now we're competing for F-35s, and we're not done. We're still going to push forward with that, and now we think we might even have an opportunity for some training missions that they purchase. They're going to be bringing their foreign investment here to Macomb County and actually hopefully get those F-35s.
That's awesome.
Manufacturing has grown leaps and bounds. We know we got a little challenge right now in the struggles that we're seeing. Roads and infrastructure. We're the ones that started bringing the attention to the public, the real issue with this. And the real issue isn't about fixing the roads. It's about fixing the funding so we can fix the roads.
Yeah, can we talk about that? Because why is the state so terrible? I mean, you hit Ohio, you hit Indiana, and the roads immediately change. So what's so ass backwards about what we're doing here?
Plain and simple, it's funding. There's no question about it. You're going to get the political response to that. One side versus the other. We can't raise taxes. We can't do this. Well, you need to do something because the reality is we are severely underfunded to fix the roads. It can't happen. The amount of money we get year after year. And the problems that we're seeing with our roads right now, it's a continued depreciation. So if you look at whatever money's coming in and the depreciation into roads, money coming in isn't coming in fast enough to fix these roads to the point where they're deteriorating. So we're getting further and further behind. I'll give you a quick example. Mound Road. Mound Road was looked upon as being one of the worst roads in the entire county.
I think I lost a few tires on that road.
Probably the entire state. I know you weren't alone. Yeah. And so, I mean, it was like every time it was pothole season, the media was there. And unfortunately, it was a huge embarrassment. And I doing press conference after press conference out there admitting this road is terrible. We had zero funding. Yeah. There was no funding to fix Mound Road. And so what did we do? We competed for a federal grant for that road project. So we asked for $200 million. Basically, $100 million was what we were trying to get out of the federal government for that road project. Even the state at the time, MDOT, was supporting that project along with others, and they realized that's not even a state project. That's not a state highway, and it's not a federal highway. But we were able to sell that case because of that corridor and the economic impact it has around the country, not just in the state of Michigan. The economic impact on that area, dealing with the big three, manufacturing, the investments with the defense industry. There was so much going on in that area in the city of Warren and the city of Sterling Heights that we were able to sell that, explain what was going on. It wasn't so much that we needed the road to be fixed, but the federal government looked at that project amongst others around the country. And it's the first time in the history of the federal government that they've ever awarded a project to that extent to a local municipality, meaning the county. They usually award those kind of funds to a state for a state project or a federal highway. They gave us that funding.
That's a badge
to fix
of
that
honor.
road. $100 million they gave us to fix that road, matched by another $100 million from Warren, Sterling Heights, and the county. And we're going to completely transform that. In fact, it's going to be shoveled in the ground. They're going to start breaking up the concrete probably this summer. We're going to start working on that.
That's
It is
awesome.
going to be
Congratulations.
completely transformative. And I'm going to tell you, Innovate Mound, if anybody has an interest that's listening right now that wants to take a look at that project, Innovate Mound, that is going to be incredibly transformative where people around, it's going to be marveled around, I'm going to say around the world, because it's not just about fixing a road. It's the technology and the infrastructure that's going in on that roadway from 696 all the way to Hall Road. People are going to be incredibly impressed. But what happened?
Exciting.
We needed the money to make that happen because we didn't have any money to support that project from the state or any local budget to do that. But the federal government, when they said, here's the money, we're going to fix that road.
That's awesome. So how does the state contribute to funding better moving forward? Is it taxes? Is it what? Is it a gas tax? What's the right solution?
I often say it's funny because I actually going through this process, I put the list of options that they've always said. Toll roads, trying to figure out how do you raise the tax,
right.
and how do you take it from this budget. So I put every option that they had available on this road, and I said to our legislators, pick one and start moving forward because something has to give. You've got to come up with the funding. So I continue to say to legislators, we can't keep dancing around this issue. They've got to figure out how do they come up with the funding, and they've got many options that are on the table. They need to start picking them so we can start moving forward with fixing roads because there isn't a darn road we can't fix here in Macomb County or anywhere around the state if we have the funding to do so.
The reason why I and so many, respect you is you don't seem overly focused on getting reelected next. You have work to do, and your work speaks for itself, and you get reelected because of the work you do. But I have to imagine that we've all been forced to be introspective a little bit during this time about what we want to do, what we want to focus on. Politics is a hot topic right now. People are looking for people that they can invest in and believe in, that'll shoot them straight. And you seem to be someone who's able to bring both parties together. I think, the fact that you're a Democrat in a, Republican, swinging county, shows that, and the fact that Republicans vote for you because of who you are and your history. When you look at the future, do you have, are you thinking about, maintaining your position or continuing to run at the county executive level? Do you have any aspirations to, head to Lansing or beyond, or where's your head at with that? Because you're a young guy, you got energy. And we need people like you. So what are your thoughts?
Andrew, I'm busy running for my life, okay? The reality is I say it all the time. I kid you not. It's like I still absolutely miss being a police officer, being on the street, engaging with police officers, getting them to understand the reality of what that job really is all about. Mm-hmm. It's not out there arresting bad guys and engaging with the public in a negative way. I truly miss that job.
Yeah.
And, I realized running for this one was only because I knew what was happening, and it was even within the party. There were people that wanted that because they were trying to figure out how they turn that party or that office into something that was going to be more political. And I thought, I can't let that happen because as a sheriff, I'd be very disappointed because they're going to try to figure out how they manage, if you will, other countywide elected officials in that same fashion. So with that being said, I decided to run for it. And I did because a lot of people encouraged me to. They wanted me to. I truly did not want to run for it. And I couldn't quite find the right person I thought was going to be there. Candace Miller would have been the only other person I would have really thought about at that time. And so I kept saying to myself, I guess I don't want to complain about things. I'm not a big complainer. So I realized if you don't want to complain about it, then you better own it. Mm-hmm. And so I did. And now being here 10 years, I got a great team, an incredible staff. And I'm very fortunate with that being said. I don't ever get ahead of myself. I never look forward and say, I want to be. I turn around, I look, I'm thinking, I'm just that kid from the city of Warren.
Yeah, right.
I don't even know how the heck I got to where I'm at right now.
Right.
It's beyond my expectations. So with that being said, I hear a lot. People are saying, are you thinking about, would you consider, are you running? And I really don't think about it. I mean, the minute somebody says it, I think about it because they're saying it for the moment, meaning because it's part of the conversation. But I walk away thinking, okay, we got to get this done. Where are we headed? What's going on next? It's like you're moving and you're motivated. So I really don't think about, running for anything else. I'm always intrigued about running for sheriff again.
Yeah, right.
Don't tell Tony Wickersham that. He'll get all nervous. I just tease him. So, but no, really, I never get ahead of myself. I just enjoy life, and I just enjoy being a part of what's going on, and making sure we're trying to do the right things and engaging with folks.
I think that I think everyone's become a quick study in politics this year because people have been stuck at home, and everything's become so politicized, as we talked about earlier. But to me, it seems like the local level is really where we can really start to make change. Local, county, and then kind of work the way up to the state, and it feels that. I know from my generation, we're starting to get some people inspired to get involved and get active. And, for people, what advice would you give to someone looking to get involved in their community, get involved in politics, be a mindful, participating member of what's going on in their backyards? What's the best way you think people can engage?
Try to stay as independent as possible and authentic as possible, meaning be who you are. Don't sit there and try to become something that others want you to become. And unfortunately, that's what happens in politics. People decide to get in and they figure, okay, I got to try to figure out how do I please this group, this organization, these people, so that I can get somewhere or I can be chosen as that candidate. In the end, you're not comfortable with who you are, because that's what you're doing is you're lying to yourself, and unfortunately it creates a problem for you, and you're never going to continue to please those people. Right. You need to continue to figure out how do you please yourself by doing the right thing. And if that means, you get unelected or you don't get elected, that's okay. Yeah. And there's nothing wrong with that. That's not a failure. That's you being committed to who it is you are and staying focused on that. That's why I say I don't worry about elections. I mean, if I don't get reelected, I will find something else to do. I'm comfortable with that. I'm not here to try to figure, oh my God, if I don't do this, it's a misstep. They're going to use this against me, and I'm probably not going to get reelected. I never think about it. I just went through an election cycle, and it was funny. It was just like any other year. I didn't put up one sign. We didn't put out any literature. We did nothing. Yeah. And some people didn't realize it until they got their ballots. They're like, hey, I just noticed you're up for election. You're running for election. It's funny if I would just go, yeah, I'm on the ballot, whatever, and I'd walk away. I was like, again, you vote for me, that's great. I really appreciate it, but I'm going to continue to do the right thing. I'm not here to do it on behalf of anyone, any organization, or any party. I'm going to try to do it on behalf of, what I see as the right thing for the entire county, period. And that's it.
That's great. That's great. So for people in Macomb County who want to stay tuned to what's going on in the community, what's going on in the county, what's the best way for them to tune in to updates? I know I follow you on Facebook, but what is the correct channels to get updates from the county on what's happening in our backyard?
Yeah, thanks for asking. Aside from this podcast, go to macombgov.org. Macombgov.org, I tell you, that's your information resource. Anything and everything you need to know what's going on in Macomb County, it's available right there on that site. And right now, obviously, the highlight is testing sites, COVID issues, and in particular, dealing with the vaccines. And we're trying to get people as much information, and I do updates on a regular basis, video updates that they can just kind of click on and take a look at.
That's great. Well, thank you so much for coming on, and hope to have you back again. But really enjoy catching up with you, and big fan and big supporter.
Appreciate it. I'm a big fan of Blake's. So this is a place. This is a go-to place. I see you got an ice rink out back there.
Yeah, man. We do.
I'm bringing my nephew.
There you go. Bring him out.
He's good. He's going to go show off out there. I know it. So thanks again.
Yeah,
thank
you.
Thank you.
Thanks for tuning in, everyone. You can find Everything Borrowed on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and iHeartRadio. Show your support and drop a 5-star review to help more people find our channel. Don't forget to subscribe. Stay up to date with us on Facebook, Instagram, and everythingborrowedpodcast.com. EBP is produced by Chelsea Cox, Jason Brown, and Vox Adams. Edited and filmed by Nick Ferguson. Art is by Adam Yarborough. Everything Borrowed is an After Hours Media production. Copyright 2021.